We are approaching very close to the midway point of the NFL season, and I think it's just about time to give an official power ranking. We're a few weeks down. We know what teams are, what they're looking like, where injuries, big issues are for teams, what teams are surprising and playing up to what they thought they could. So let's just get into it. I want to be clear with a couple of things. This isn't like how I think this team should have been done. I'm not ranking teams by what they did in the past. I'm, for the most part, ranking teams as they sit right now. If you are a team that has a really good roster overall, but your starting quarterback got hurt and is out, we'll talk about that with a couple teams. If they're out, I'm going to take that into consideration. Injuries are in consideration. This is a week post-week 6. What are we post? Yeah, post-week 6 of the NFL season as teams stand right now. Going over the tiers, they're pretty simple. At the top, we have Super Bowl contenders. These are teams that I think are obviously fighting for a Super Bowl this season, and anything less would be somewhat of a disappointment. Deep playoff runs, teams that maybe don't have the full high caliber roster they need to take them to the Super Bowl, but they're looking really good. It's any week they could beat anyone. A lot of teams fit into that category. And then we have this competitive wild card section. Teams you're kind of thinking are maybe going to go 9-8, kind of another sort of level of team that really could beat anyone in the regular season, but could also maybe lose to someone they shouldn't lose to. They're going to be competitive every single week for the most part, but not necessarily looking for a deep playoff run or anything. And then the next tier, 0.500, just another way to say teams that are just about as average as they can be. Probably not going to beat some of the better teams in the league. Maybe could if things go their way, but you're really not betting on it, but also definitely not in the bottom tier. Next up, we have next year's our year. These are the teams that might have a couple wins going. They have one facet or something about their team that's keeping them not in the tier that's below, but they're still not quite there yet. And then obviously at the bottom, we have XFL studs, the worst teams in the league, which is where we are going to start with our first team, the Carolina Panthers. Listen, the Panthers are a team I was kind of high on at the start of this year. I'm going to have to, drink my dog water off in this one. The Bryce Young situation has just completely collapsed. It's gone horribly. They benched him earlier this year. Andy Dalton has stepped up and played better. This offense is, for the most part, competitive. The main issue is the defense. I joked around and said XFL studs, but to be honest, this defense that the Panthers have is about the caliber of an XFL defense. There's so many no names on this team. And the only real piece they have on defense right now that's healthy, I'm actually not even sure if he's healthy at the moment, is J.C. Horn. And one man can only do so much, especially someone who's like 23, 24. So, yeah, Panthers are very deserving and well on the bottom of this chart. Next up, another thing about this kind of tier list I'm doing is we got to take in consideration with trades and stuff like that. So you're going to be seeing that. But the next team I have in this tier is the Raiders. Now, they just lost Devontae Adams. Even while he was on the team, this was still one of the worst offenses in the league. Baker Mayfield, Gardner Minshew hasn't proven to be exactly what I thought he could be, but also I think there's a lot of problems with the coaching and play calling, decision making in general. I don't think Antonio Pierce has stepped up in the way people thought he could. I don't think he's been that Dan Campbell-esque guy, which is a bummer because I thought, a lot of people were hoping he could be that and have some faith in this team. I don't have much faith in this team. They beat the Ravens early on, and other than that, really haven't done much. In fact, they lost to the team that I put beneath them, the Panthers. So the Raiders not looking good at the moment. Then next up in this tier, I'm going to stick the Browns in here. As long as, Deshaun Watson's the starting quarterback, this team is never going to leave this bottom tier despite having a quality defense, which hasn't really played up to their standard so far this year. It still is a good defense. They've dealt with some injuries and some other issues, but regardless, this offense is complete a complete wash, especially with them now trading and losing Amari Cooper. Now you have Deshaun Watson with no other real weapons. I know Jerry Jeudy's there, David Njoku's still there, Nick Chubb slated to come back pretty soon. I don't think that changes things. I think if Jameis Winston starts this week or whatever, I'd consider bumping them up a little bit. But at this point in time right now, Deshaun Watson is playing the worst quarterback in the league. Moving on from that, we will stick the Patriots up in this tier as well. Not a good team, good roster at all. The defense has greatly disappointed. You can kind of blame the fact that they traded their number one pass rusher away to the Falcons to be part of that, and also Christian Barmore getting hurt. This defense has not been what it should be or what I was expecting it to be. I knew this team wasn't going to be very good, but I thought that was mainly going to be in the offensive side of things, which it hasn't been good there either, which is why they're in this tier. But defensively, things have just fallen completely off a cliff, and no one on offense has any ability to make any explosive plays, create separation, from the receiver standpoint. Jacoby Brissett's definitely been struggling. This offensive line is horrible. They have no run game. Honestly, the performance Drake May had this last week when he started was a lot better than I was expecting. And, I was someone that was high on Drake May in the draft, but man, what he had to deal with was insane. So obviously that loss to the Texans wasn't anything good. It's not going to be anything positive for them. But when you just focus solely on Drake May, I don't think you feel very bad about his performance given what he was given. Next up on this tier, I have the Titans. Yeah, it's just not working out very well for them. They've added some pieces this offseason that I thought would make this defense and team in general a lot better, but I think it's obvious at this point, at least to me, not everyone's on the same train. I don't think Will Levis is the guy. I don't think he's the dude to turn this place around. Now, I'm also someone that's usually on the side of young quarterbacks and giving them a chance, but I think with some of this Bryce Young stuff we've learned, and probably 17 other quarterbacks in the last few years, throwing out a 20-year-old to start against normal teams when the team they're on is dog water doesn't really work, especially when they don't really know exactly what they're doing and they're not ready to start. I was talking about earlier this season, coming with the draft, there's some players, quarterbacks that I thought were maybe better than others, but there were some quarterbacks that I also thought, while they maybe weren't better in the long run, were able to start pretty soon. And I think Bo Nix, we're not even talking about them. I thought Bo Nix was that kind of guy where even if he does struggle, even if the offense isn't great or working perfectly fine, I still thought he would kind of battle through that. I don't feel that same way about Will Levis. So the Titans have a lot to clean up and a lot of moves to make to try to get a quarterback in the building. Next and last on this tier is the Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins are one of the harder teams to rank because we don't really know their quarterback situation exactly. I'm pretty sure Tua is supposed to be cleared to play either next week or 2 weeks from now, but that doesn't even mean he's going to. And it doesn't really mean that this team is going to have a complete turnaround either. I've been very disappointed in Mike McDaniel throughout this process of Tua being hurt, because while we were watching Matt LaFleur turn Malik Willis into a very solid starting quarterback for a few weeks while Jordan Love was out, Mike McDaniels couldn't get anything done on offense. Not to mention injuries to both sides of the ball, offense and defense. The trenches are weak throughout. This team is easy to run against. It's easy to stop the run. The offensive line isn't great. Tua was a big deal for making up for some of those problems. But at this point right now, I'm genuinely confused how you have the best receiver in the NFL in Tyreek Hill and can't come up with anything. This team built themselves to be high-flying, fast, and all-action down the sideline, and it hasn't worked out well for them. It's bit them in the butt hardcore. These teams that refuse to work heavily in the trenches at all and just focus directly on the playmakers, the receivers and cornerbacks, even like edge rushers you can put in that, it hasn't been proving to work very well in my opinion. This season has been proving that, and the Dolphins are proving that especially. We're going to bump up to our next tier with the Jaguars, who's going to start it off. And before I talk about the Jaguars, I will say the teams within the tier that they're in are ordered correctly from left to right. So in the XFL studs tier, the Panthers are first. That means I think they're the 32nd best team in the NFL, or the first worst team in the NFL, whichever way you want to look at it. We're basically going from left to right within each tier as to how good I think they are in that tier. So the Dolphins are at the top of the XFL studs tier. The Jaguars at the bottom of next year's our year tier. Now the Jaguars was another team where I'm going to have to bite the bullet on and say I was wrong in the offseason. I was talking them up a little bit. I wasn't very high on Doug Peterson or thinking he was going to be a prolific coach. But one thing I was pretty high on was Trevor and some of the pieces on this offense. I also did spend some time talking about how this team is weird, and they made some weird decisions, but regardless, I didn't think it was going to be this bad. They are this bad. I do feel like putting them in the next year's our year tier, because I don't think this roster is nearly as bad as the other teams in the XFL studs tier. This is a really well put together. This is an okay put together roster with some pretty good players on it. The fact that they're 1-5 or 1-4 doesn't make the most sense, and honestly, Doug Peterson should lose his job before the game this Sunday. Next up in this tier, I have the Saints. Now, the Saints are interesting, especially in terms of my analysis on them, to me at least, because at the start of the season, I said that they weren't very good, and I thought Derek Carr was just a whatever, nothing quarterback. And then the first 2 weeks of the season, they looked like they were going to prove me wrong and be a really good team. And then everything after that has gone to exactly what I said, which is a team with not much in the trenches on both sides of the ball, not a lot of explosive weapons on offense. Derek Carr is right at average when it comes to quarterback. I mean, he's such a bland, provides really nothing for you quarterback, and that's proven to be true this season so far. Obviously, season's not done. The Saints have a lot of games left that are winnable to prove that it wasn't just a 2-week fluke. I don't think they're going to do that, though. Honestly, I see them sitting in this tier for the rest of the season, especially with Rashid Shaheed getting hurt. We'll see how that plays out, but I'm not very faithful that the Saints are going to do much this season. Next up, we have the Giants, who another team I just don't really like and don't think is very good. Obviously, we're at this lower tier, but I don't have a lot to say about them. One thing I will say is that their defense has been playing a lot better. Playing against Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, only letting up 17 points with some late scores was definitely kind of, what we thought this defense was capable of. This pass rushing unit stepping up. Dexter Lawrence is having a crazy year too, by the way. I think this goes back to what, we've all been saying about the Giants is their offense sucks. They don't have any weapons except Malik Neighbors, who's been hurt. Pretty sure he's supposed to come back pretty soon. And then when it comes to Daniel Jones, he's in a similar kind of thing with Derek Carr, where he just doesn't add anything extra at all. He's a dump down merchant. He doesn't create any explosive plays, really. It's just so boring and bland, and isn't any benefit to this offense, in my opinion. I still stand on the takes I had talking about his contract and other quarterback contracts, which I also think I brought up Derek Carr in that as well. But nonetheless, we're going to put the Giants right at this spot here in the next year's our year tier, although I have a feeling the Giants are going to giant next year. And then next up, we have a team that I was very high on. I can't be incredibly high on because the record hasn't really shown up. But the Cardinals. The Cardinals have had a very spotty but good offense this season for the most part. Their offense isn't as consistent as it needs to be to make up for how lackluster their defense is, because In terms of just overall the defense of the Cardinals, it's not incredibly far off from the Panthers and the Raiders or whoever else. I mean, this defense is bad. But I do think Kyler Murray is playing awesome. I think when Marvin Harrison Jr. is on, he's really on. Michael Wilson is still a great piece to this offense. Greg Dortch is there. Trey McBride is still proving to be, a top 10 tight end, top 15 probably. I think that this Cardinals team can turn it around and be a team that fits into this next tier pretty soon. I don't think they're there right now, though. And heading to another tier, the .500 tier, we're going to stick the Bengals in here. I'm just not sold on this at all. I'm not thinking this plan that they have is going to work. The defense, by all accounts, should be able to step up more in the second half of the year. But it hasn't so far, and the defense has played absolutely horrible. I don't think I've seen a team this lopsided in a while, but regardless, the offense hasn't proven that it can be consistent enough to have a crazy great record and rebound from a bad defense. I love Joe Burrow. I think Jamar Chase is fantastic, top 5 receiver right now. T. Higgins is great too. But at the end of the day, you go play against the Giants. I know I just talked with their defense, but 17-7, kind of a late score there. It's like, is this some prolific offense that's going to make up for the defense? It isn't, and it hasn't been so far. They have way too many losses to rebound, so I'm going to keep them here at this moment. Next up is a team I've been disappointed with so far. More specifically, I've been disappointed with the quarterback play, and that is the Colts with Anthony Richardson. He just has not been getting it done. Now, here's the thing. As I said earlier, I'm a fan of young quarterbacks, so I'm not saying get rid of him. I'm not saying to even bench him, but the facts are the facts. He isn't playing well right now. One of his major issues is he is just not accurate. He's not an accurate quarterback. That's something he's struggled with very heavily coming out of college and hasn't really cleaned up very much so far. Now, last year, he didn't get a lot of time to develop. He got hurt and missed most of the season. This season, they're 3-3, and he's still struggling with that. I'm really hoping that's something they can clean up because, honestly, his processing and the mental side of things aren't bad. He's kind of coming along there pretty nicely, and obviously the athleticism he brings is a great plus, but the accuracy is bad. The occasional terrible decision he still makes is definitely holding back the offense. The more important thing about the Colts, though, is that their defense hasn't been great. More importantly, their run defense, which is, again, kind of on that XFL tier of play. The run defense is just whoever wants to pick up yards, they'll let pick up yards. So I don't know where I stand with the Colts right now in terms of where they go from the rest of the season, if they stay healthy and everything. I still think Shane Steichen is a great head coach, or at least could be, has the potential to, and has shown that, that's something that could be in his future, in his bag, is being a next level coach. I just, we talked about him being such a great head coach when he made Joe Flacco look good this year and everything. I'd like to see him be an amazing head coach by making Anthony Richardson look amazing. Because so far it seems like turning around guys like Gardner Minshew and Joe Flacco are a lot easier to do than Anthony Richardson, which, by the way, I know he's a big project. He really is, but still, got to get it done. And then next up, this is one I thought might be a bit controversial that they're this high because their record isn't very good. But I have the Rams here. We got to keep in mind that the Rams have been dealing with a lot of injuries as well. And a few reasons why I do have them this high. One, I'm a big believer in Matthew Stafford. Two, Sean McVay is still one of the best coaches in the NFL. And when you look at how the last, this season has gone for them, other than the Rams-Cardinals game in week 2, which was a complete blowout, the Cardinals blew them out 41-10. Other than that, every other game has been one score. And also keep in mind, they went and played the 49ers and beat them, which I talked a little bit about. But this isn't a team that is getting their backs blown out every week, and that's why their record is so poor. This is a team that has obviously been dealing with injuries and obviously doesn't have the men at the moment to compete. Well, I'm not even going to say to compete, to finish and win games, because they have been competitive despite their injuries. The defense does have some issues, but just like how the offense has injuries that will, fix themselves over time. Cooper Kupp is supposed to come back this week. Puka Nacua has 2 or 3 weeks left to go. There's some issues on the defense injury-wise, but those are also things that they're going to get back. Jared Verse is playing at a very high level for a rookie, and Braden Fisk looks great for a rookie also. So despite losing Aaron Donald and not having an awesome defense otherwise, they've made up for it, and that's something I think we can credit to Sean McVay. So the Rams aren't a team I see fighting for a playoff spot, but I think I would be lying to myself if I said they should be in a different lower tier than this. Next up, we have the Jets, which I was pretty close to, despite them having Devontae Adams, putting them even lower than this. But I gotta wait it out. I think I'll give it this week with the Jets, see how they do with Devontae Adams. I don't have a lot to say about them. This whole situation has really just rubbed me the wrong way with everything. I just don't like the Jets right now. I never really liked the Jets. I mean, I've never been a fan of the Jets, so I'll give you my bias and throw that out of the way. But I just have that feeling, like I said earlier, with a different team, the Jets are just gonna jet. Every time you think they're onto something or have some big move made, they're gonna jet. Then next up, another one that might be slightly controversial. We'll see. I have the Broncos over the Jets. Bo Nix has had a lot of ups and a lot of downs, more downs this season for sure. But looking at the entirety of this team, the defense is rock solid. And, another team dealing with a little bit of injuries right now. But this is a team I don't see getting blown out a whole lot more throughout the season. And as we've gone through the season, Bo Nix has gotten better. The problems on offense aren't really just him. I don't think there's enough playmakers on this team, not enough receivers to get the ball to. Cortland Sutton hasn't been Cortland Sutton this year, to be honest, and honestly, the play calling hasn't been fantastic either. Now, that's a tough conversation to have when you have, a head coach like Sean Payton, who's been in the league this long, Super Bowl winning head coach. He knows everything about football that there is to know. And then you get a smart young quarterback like Bo Nix in the building. It's, tough figuring out how to handle that. What kind of a playbook is he dealing with right now? Is this 20% of what Sean Payton wants to do and he's working him up to it? Or are we seeing Sean Payton overdoing it with him a little bit and Bo Nix is getting confused? I don't know, but I do know that the Broncos don't have nearly that bad of a record as kind of thought going into the season. So I'm still hopeful that the Broncos will rebound, but at the, top end of the 0.500 tier seems just about right for me. And this one, I know is going to be controversial, but I'm ready for the hate. I'm putting the I'm putting the Cowboys in this tier as well. They're not a good football team. They just aren't. And it's not like, okay, I was giving some benefit to other teams earlier with injuries, right? I know they're dealing with some injuries, especially in the secondary and everything. That will help. This team, without those players, has been horrible in a few games this season. They went and got their asses absolutely demolished by the Lions. So we already know that they're not going to be able to compete with these top-end teams. The Ravens also handled them. I know the score was 28-25 at the end or whatever, but you didn't watch that game thinking, this is a close outing. Oh, 25-28. The Cowboys were almost in it. No, they got their asses handed to them, and then the Ravens let off on the gas, made some mistakes late, and they were able to come back, but this still isn't a good team. Just like I mentioned with the Colts, anyone can run on this team all they want, as much as they want. No one's going to stop them. And again, with those injuries, which aren't, I was talking about being, unbiased with injuries and stuff in comparison with other teams. Well, this team doesn't have those kind of injuries that are going to come back in a week or two. Deron Bland's out for the rest of the season. And Trayvon Diggs, I'm not entirely sure where he's at right now, but I don't see him as a savior that's going to come in and fix this. On the offense, Dak isn't playing his best football. I don't think he's playing horribly, but he isn't playing his best football. And CeeDee Lamb is just not the top 5 receiver that I thought and many others thought he was going to be. He isn't, and it's not just that. He's the only receiver getting it done. he isn't getting it done when he gets his opportunities either. His route running hasn't been as good this season. He hasn't been putting as much effort into him. He's had a few fumbles this season as well, trouble holding onto the ball. He hasn't been making explosive, game-changing, game-altering plays, really. And now the Cowboys are sitting at the top of this .500 tier. And I know, the 3 tiers above, not everyone is going to agree with that, but I just don't think this is a very good team right now. And next and last for this tier, I'm going to stick the Chargers over them. The way I kind of thought about this too, and I'll talk about these two together because I think, this is where people are really going to disagree with, is saying that the Chargers are over the Cowboys rather than just the tier. If the Chargers and Cowboys played today, I think the Chargers would smack the shit out of them, with or without Justin Herbert, because of what I said earlier. They would run the ball down their throat the whole game, and the Cowboys would have nothing to stop them. And on defense, there's still some nice pieces on this defense for the Chargers to compete against a team like the Cowboys. So if I'm being honest about that kind of matchup and where I see the Chargers, yeah, I'm taking them over the Cowboys. Now, with that being said, let's talk a little bit more specific with the Chargers. This is a team I see struggling to kind of climb up into this competitive wild card deep playoff run this year. But this is still a team I'm sticking at the top of this tier. This is a team that could beat you, it could be almost any team any week. Not that this is a prolific offense and defense and Justin Herbert's coming for you, but there's a lot of great pieces on this team, and Harbaugh has been doing a fantastic job of getting wins and just playing ball that will get them wins and playing ball that will keep the offense and defense going, and not focusing on what everyone was saying in the offseason of like, oh, they have Justin Herbert and he's only going to be running and he wants to draft a tackle, blah, 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 he's going to waste Justin Herbert. Well, Justin Herbert's been getting wasted his whole career so far by not getting wins, so let's focus on that first, and then when Justin Herbert has to step up and be Josh Allen-like, we'll let that happen. But yeah, at this point right now, I see personally no problem with where I have the Chargers. If you do, let me know, but that's where I have them. Next tier up, I'm going to stick the Seahawks actually at the start of this tier into the competitive wild card area. Geno Smith has been playing great football this year so far. There's still a lot of awesome pieces on this offense. This offensive line is a really big struggle, though. The play calling can and should help work around the offensive line, which is, one of the reasons I look at a team like this and don't think like that offensive line's horrible. This is going to be a terrible show on the offensive side of things. I don't think that entirely because they're able to work around it. Geno Smith is playing great ball, as I mentioned. A lot of receivers to get the ball to. Talking about this defense now, this is a defense with a lot of potential to be a lot better than they have been. As I mentioned with some other teams, been dealing with some injuries, but injuries that are going to come back and help fill out this defense to be better at stopping the run, because that's been a really big issue for them as well. And yeah, the Seahawks are a team I think could finish with 9, 10 or so wins or whatever. They had that 3-0 start at the season. I wasn't super high on them because they didn't play any real teams. I was honestly like a little bit more impressed with some of the losses they've had recently, because they were still able to show the really good parts of their team while also saying like, hey, we're pretty beat up and injured at the moment on defense, and that's why the Lions are able to score this many points and Jared Goff is able to have a perfect game. But at this point right now, I think the Seahawks are hopeful that it'll only get better. And I'm also feeling similar, so I don't have a problem with sticking them in that tier at all. Next up, I'm going to stick the Steelers into this competitive wildcard tier. This is kind of something you just have to do because they're going to get 9 wins and have a shot in the playoffs or in the wild card. I've been very interested in watching Justin Fields this season, though. I'd say at the start of the season, he was looking a lot better. Last few weeks, he's kind of, gone back to old Justin Fields in a lot of ways. But regardless, this team does have a lot of issues that aren't on him entirely. The play calling on offense still isn't very good. But the weapons and playmakers just aren't there. George Pickens has been more of a social media problem than a problem on the field for opposing defenses. And I don't know what it is with the Steelers and these kind of receivers, but whatever. Not a lot of explosiveness. I'd want this offensive run game to be a lot better. That's one thing that's really surprised me is having Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, Justin Fields, and then kind of revamping this offensive line with, while I'll admit, younger rookies that probably aren't ready to dominate right now. But a lot of the guys they did draft were guys that were kind of high floor run blockers. And they haven't been tapping into the run game the exact way I was, kind of hoping, not being as creative as I thought they could be. But, here we are, 2 losses on the season. Looking like Russ is going to be starting this next week. We'll see how that goes, how that kind of plays out. This is about where I think the Steelers should be. And then next up, a team that has made a lot of improvements over the season, the Bears. Caleb Williams is finally playing, at least to some degree of what we thought he could. And this offense is rolling in a lot of ways. The run game is going too. That was a really big deal at the start of the season, was that there was no run game at all. And as you noticed, as the season progressed, the run game started to pick up, and so did the pass game. Those two things are married, and they go together. The Bears are, have a lot of pieces, man. This offense is... The ceiling on this offense really is deep playoff run, Super Bowl contender. We're just not there yet. It's too early. It's too soon. I'm also... the offensive line hasn't been good enough for that kind of idea. So definitely not wanting to put them in any other tier right now, but I'm impressed with them. They've been doing great. The defense is doing their thing. Bears are looking fine. And here we have another team that got off to a rocky start this season with the Falcons, and have only really gotten better since then. It is Kirktober. Happy Kirktober, everyone. The best month of football on the world is when Kirk Thuggo is slinging that thing all around the court. Drake London has really emerged as, the number one guy on this offense, which is why I took him with the second round pick in my fantasy. I was a little regretful of that early, but it looks like I might be right about that. We'll see how that goes. Kyle Pitts is still someone you want to get more out of. Bijan Robinson is definitely someone they need to get more out of. But regardless of all of that, this team has a good record right now. They're playing good football. They're competitive with everyone within the last few weeks at least. Defense still lackluster for the most part, but there are still guys like AJ Terrell, Jesse Bates, Justin Simmons making plays and doing stuff. It's really, a few good stars on this defense with a lot of holes in the rest of the defense. So I do think, the Falcons are, as long as, Kirk can play at this level for another couple years, or maybe Michael Penix comes in next year or two, this team is a few years away from being Super Bowl contenders as long as things go according to plan. But things don't really go according to plan, so we'll be careful with that. And then next up, I have a team I really struggled with which tier to put them in. I almost wanted to put them in this competitive wild card, but based off the roster talent, I will give them the benefit of the doubt and put the Eagles in the deep playoff run category. Here are my main problems with the Eagles. Jalen Hurts is an average quarterback. Defense still struggles to tackle. Nick Sirianni is a bottom tier head coach. I'll just say it. He frankly is one of the, top 5 worst coaches in the NFL. The play calling isn't great, and that's not even his job. His attitude sucks most of the time. You remember that win he had against the Browns this week, and then started yelling at the fans and stuff? What the hell was that? So I'm not a fan of Nick Sirianni, and I think Jalen Hurts has really been struggling, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but at this moment of time, this is still, in general, a stacked roster. I mean, across the board, the offensive line is still great. The receiving core is awesome. They've been dealing with some injuries. That's why they've kind of fallen off. But those guys are coming back here pretty soon. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And then going to the defense, the defensive line has plenty of pieces. And then in the secondary, honestly, to regroup and be better, have a better record than what they've had. I think the bigger thing with the Eagles is this is a team that should be a Super Bowl contender and isn't, And it's tough to rank them because when I look at this roster and compare it to the entirety of the rest of the league, it's legit a top 3 roster, but I'm struggling to stick them in this deep playoff run category, and that irks me. So we're going to keep them here for now, see how things finish out the rest of the season. Next up, after the Eagles, I'm going to stick the Packers here in the deep playoff run category. It's been kind of hit or miss in some areas, especially with Jordan Love and his development and everything. But it was early on in the season. He gets hurt. Week 1 loses against the Eagles in Brazil, which is a game you can just kind of throw away, in my opinion. And then gets beat up pretty bad by the Vikings. But I'll ask this, who hasn't been beaten up pretty bad by the Vikings? I'll talk about them more later, but I don't look at that game and think Jordan Love and this offense or whatever was horrible. Now, the problems I do have with this team, with the Packers, are on defense, especially with the pass rushing unit. I don't know what happened there. I really don't know what happened there. They're not winning with what they have, and they have a few pieces I thought were very good players in Rashawn Gary. Devontae Wyatt was coming along. Kenny Clark has been one of the better parts of this defensive line, but still hasn't stepped up in the way you'd hope. Preston Smith has just been whatever. Lucas Van Ness is still developing and doesn't look awesome, so the defense has really been struggling for sure, but I do still see this as a team that can compete with just about anyone for the most part. You know, it's any given week in the NFL, and especially with the Packers, all the weapons they have on offense. Jordan Love, when he's on, is a top-end quarterback, so I think it's safe to say that the Packers are in about this area here, and it's good to know that if Jordan Love goes down, Matt LaFleur is going to do a pretty solid job at keeping the troops rallied and trying to get wins and stuff. So that's a big deal for me. Teams that are able to succeed with their quarterback or number 1 player getting hurt are teams that you usually will see do well in the playoffs, because more than anything, it just means that they have a really good coach. Next up, a team I mentioned in a couple of videos, but man, the Buccaneers have really came around to me, and yeah, I love Baker. He's doing a fantastic job. A lot of the pieces on this defense are doing a lot better. Todd Bowles is doing an awesome job calling this defense. The pieces on offense are great. Chris Godwin is honestly playing more like the wide receiver 1 than Mike Evans is. But when they do go to Mike Evans, he's still making catches. He's still getting, deep touchdowns, head topping people. He's still Mike Evans. But Chris Godwin has really been unlocked this season, which is just awesome to see. And if Baker Mayfield wants to throw 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions the rest of the season, I don't care. He did it against the Saints. It doesn't matter. I'm still a fan of him. I'm still a fan of what they have going on. This team has a lot of what you need to make a deep playoff run, and when you see all the pieces kind of connecting like this, it's very, very hopeful, and I bet Buccaneers fans are feeling awesome about this. Not to mention the offensive line really stepping up. Graham Barton has been one of the best rookies this year, to be honest, just one of the best overall rookies, and he's definitely been one of the best rookie offensive linemen. He's stepped up and played awesome. Luke Goedeke is awesome at right tackle as well. Tristan Wirfs, we've already known as that guy. I think he's been dealing with some injuries this season, but he's that guy. And Cody Mock has stepped up and been a fine starting guard for them. So, and then when you look at the running back room in this as well, you have a 3-headed dragon to deal with Bucky Irving, Rashad White, and Sean Tucker. Those are 3 guys I liked coming out of the draft. Not Rashad White necessarily, but he's the starter, so yeah, you can kind of look at him first, and then the other two guys I liked out of the draft that are playing awesome. So yeah, this offense has a lot of different routes to go with. Not like receiver routes, but routes of how they want to execute, play, and win. They can beat you in the ground game. They can beat you through the air. Defense is probably the weaker point on this team, but you still have guys like Zion McCollum really stepping up too at cornerback. So overall, huge fan of the Buccaneers. Moving on to the next team, we're going to go with the Washington Commanders. Yeah, this team really blew me away. This is not what I was expecting. I said earlier on a different video that I thought there was kind of the wrong idea on Jaden Daniels, that people thought he was this raw prospect that was going to be clueless for the first year and then was going to, be Patrick Mahomes the next year. I didn't think that. I thought Jaden Daniels was going to be a fine quarterback this season and then get better and, end up being ultimately a pretty good quarterback. So I think people that thought that other thing about him originally were wrong. He's not a raw prospect, and that was clear if you watch his college tape. He wasn't at all, especially with his age and how much starting experience he had. The thing I wasn't expecting was for him to be this much of a game changer. I saw some random comment of someone talking about him on some Instagram post. I'm not even going to try to quote it and bring it up or anything, but they said something along the lines of Jaden Daniels, it feels like he gives the Commanders a chance every single week. And being able to be that as a rookie quarterback is a huge deal, and I fully agree with that. Looking at their last game, even though they lost against the Ravens, he was legitimately giving them a chance to win that game throughout just about all of it. Now, ultimately, the Ravens came out with it at the end. That's just a better built team that's more established and everything. We'll talk about later, but Jaden Daniels is playing very, very high level of football, and I've just been so impressed with him. I mean, I will say right now that me having Drake May over Jaden Daniels was probably wrong. I'm not giving up on Drake May and saying he's trash now or anything, but I do think it's safe to say that I was wrong about what I thought he was going to be in terms of his floor and his ceiling, so he's just been fantastic. Now we get into the heavies, the big tiers, Super Bowl contenders. We are going to kick off this tier with the 49ers. Now, I think it's safe to say most people kind of feel something similar to what I'm about to say with the 49ers, which is that despite their record, they are still a team that's going to be competing for a Super Bowl this year. They are still one of the better teams in the league. They struggled with some tough losses throughout the season, just getting unlucky or a few bad calls, a few bad plays or whatever that didn't go their way. It just, sometimes that happens in football. Things just don't happen how you want them to, despite having the better roster or whatever it may be. But this team does absolutely belong in the Super Bowl contender tier still. There's still so many weapons. This defense is awesome still. It's not playing up to the standard it has the last few years, I think, but there's still a lot of awesome pieces on this team. And then you look at guys like hopefully Christian McCaffrey coming back later in the year, and Deebo Samuel being fully healthy, and hopefully Brandon Ayuk stops sucking. And then one of the most impressive things about this team, honestly, is Brock Purdy. I think we all owe an apology to this man for pretending like this was just some sob story and it was some, American dream thing. He's a damn good quarterback. He is a top 10 quarterback. He's established himself. And keep in mind, we've had a few weeks this season where he didn't have Christian McCaffrey and he didn't have Deebo Samuel. And then Brandon Ayuk didn't step up and he still played awesome. He's been playing fantastic football, honestly, since he entered the league and started playing. But I think this is finally the year we can look at his body of work and say, okay, we know what he is. He is a good quarterback. He makes really great throws. He's very impressive with his mind and being able to read the field, pre-snap, post-snap, reading defenses, looking at what his offense is doing, getting shots deep down the field into little tiny windows. He's been fantastic at that. And I think something else people struggle to acknowledge is, despite him looking like, a little white kid out of Iowa State, he's a good athlete. He's been electric when it comes to escaping the pocket and making plays, getting out, rolling out, and hucking deep downfield, making defenders miss. He's been awesome at all that stuff that people said he couldn't do. All of the play extension, playmaking, the Lamar Jackson stuff, definitely not on Lamar Jackson's level. I'm not going there. But all that kind of stuff, he's been awesome at. In fact, it's one of the better parts of his game is he is a playmaker. This is not a field general. This is not someone that's just a system quarterback or whatever. This dude is the truth. I'm a huge Brock Purdy fan now. I mean, I always kind of have been, but dude's just playing out of his mind. Enough with the Brock Purdy love. Let's move on to the next team I have here, the Bills. The Bills have also, of course, been very impressive this season. They've had a few tough losses, but I think one of the things that really had me put them over the 49ers, and I was kind of considering just having them in the deep playoff run category. One of the things they did recently to get them in the Super Bowl contender tier is trade and acquire Amari Cooper. They have a true wide receiver one now. While we had a lot of fun with them finding ways to make it work, passing the ball to 14 different players every time throughout an offensive game, it's nice to have a number one wide receiver that you can funnel your offense through and then go to the other guys and then go to Dalton Kincaid and then go to Khalil Shakir and then go to Curtis Samuel and Keon Coleman. It's nice for those guys to have an Amari Cooper that is now going to be facing the number one corner and is the kind of guy that you need someone on him that's going to lock him up, or else he will burn you. He will cut any defense he needs as long as he isn't, managed as a typical wide receiver one. So getting him in this room was a big deal. Now moving on to other sides of this team, let's talk about Josh Allen for a second. He's been awesome. I put him in the wrong tier earlier this year. I said he was like a tier below that kind of tier 2 of guys with like Lamar and everything. I said he was below that. It was kind of something I did is to like challenge him a little bit. Not like I thought he would see it, but just we've all kind of just consensus been putting him as the second or third best quarterback every year, and I think this is kind of one of those years I'm looking at it and feeling that way. He definitely is a top 3 quarterback, at least top 4. It's a tough call, but he's playing awesome. And then the defense has just been fine. There's definitely some holes and some things they'll have to clean up as the season progresses, especially with Sean McDermott being the head coach and the defensive-minded guy there. Kind of needs to start shaping up that defense a little bit better. Overall, I do think the Bills totally have a shot to be a Super Bowl contender this year, especially after getting Amari Cooper. We just got to see some more consistency on offense. I think Amari Cooper provides that. More importantly, though, I think seeing this defense be better, a lot better than they have been, is going to be a key part of making a deep run here in the playoffs. Oh, also, I was going to say getting James Cook back, but the fact that Ray Davis stepped up last week and played some really good running back, I think they can just make it work. Look, this offensive line is good. This is a really good offensive line, and the play calling in terms of the run game is rock solid as well. And when you get a guy like Ray Davis in there who has a lot of college experience, is a good athlete, smart, doesn't matter if it's a 3rd, 4th, 5th undrafted guy, 1st-round pick, whatever it is, he's that kind of dude that you give him those lanes, he will take full advantage of them, and that's what he did. He was running really hard this last week against the Jets, who have a pretty solid defensive line. So moving on to the next team on this list, I'm going to put the Chiefs here right after the Bills. A team that's undefeated, but I think most people kind of have that same thing in mind where it's like the least deserving 5-0 team or whatever. I get what people are saying, but keep in mind this is still the Chiefs. I know everyone wants to hate on them and everything, but keep in mind this is the Chiefs. They've had 3 Super Bowls in the last 5 years or whatever. Keep in mind this is the Chiefs. Don't let yourself get burned when it comes playoff time, and no one can seem to stop them. So the Chiefs are just one of those teams that even if they weren't 5-0, if they were 2-3 or whatever, some of those games that they did that were one score and came down to one play, if they did lose some of those, I'm still putting them in the Super Bowl contender tier. I'm not putting them in this tier because they're 5-0. I hope that's understood. But Patrick Mahomes is playing good football. I'd say great football even. He's not playing elite football. I don't think he's playing like the best quarterback in the league this year so far. But this is, as I said multiple times, it's still the Chiefs. Don't let yourselves get burned, okay? And then next up, the true America's team. This is the real America's team, in my humble opinion. The Lions. Man, the Lions are really good. The Lions are really good at football. Now, I was going to have them a bit higher. I was going to have them battling for the 1 spot, but with Aiden Hutchinson getting hurt, that's really tough. That's just a really big hit for them on the season. I think they're going to recover and their defense is going to be fine, but I think with Aiden Hutchinson, this defense was coming around to being great. Without him, it's a struggle. I've seen a lot of people kind of mentioning and talking about Max Crosby trade. That would be awesome. That would be so sweet. I'm not even a Lions fan. In fact, as a fan of another team, it's in my interest that the Lions don't get him. But it would just be so sweet. And then when Aiden Hutchinson comes back next year, now you have Hutch and Max Crosby. It hasn't even happened yet, or at all. It might not. I don't want to work myself up to it, but the Lions are really good. Playing really good football. Jameson Williams was one of those guys that a lot of people talked about as having a breakout year and finally coming around. Well, they weren't lying. Jameson Williams is here. He isn't a prolific wide receiver 1, but he is what this offense needs to add that vertical threat, add that explosive play to each and every game. And he's just gotten so much better with the consistency, his hands, his route running, his ability to, make guys miss and have big explosive plays just with run after catch has been awesome. David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs are here to stay. This offensive line is fantastic. If there were a team built to win a Super Bowl throughout, it would be the Lions, except with missing Aiden Hutchinson, it's tough. Next up, this is where things get, there's a lot of tough spots within this list, but I'm going to put the Vikings here, undefeated, playing some of the best football in the league. I don't want to talk about negatives, but I think a lot of people kind of look at this team and say they just should be the number 1 team. I like Sam Darnold. I was a big fan of that move. I love the fact that he's been playing good. My problem with having the Vikings higher than 3 is I don't think this offense and Sam Darnold specifically can go toe-to-toe with the other 2 teams I'm going to talk about. And speaking on this defense, which has been prolific across the board, this is really one of those defenses that we're going to have to give a name to here pretty soon. Just awesome across the board on defense, and it's Flores. We can chalk a lot of that up to is the schematics of it and everything, but the guys that are on the field are doing their jobs very well at a very high level. So I do see this team as a Super Bowl contender. I do see them in the top 3. I don't see them as the 1 right now just because I don't think Sam Darnold is going to go toe-to-toe with CJ Stroud and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, Brock Purdy even. I just don't see that happening. I think they're a little bit too weak on the offensive side of things to keep up with those guys. And when we're talking about matchups of like the Vikings defense versus some of these other guys, sometimes the difference between, that electric elite defense and anyone else is a quarterback that doesn't matter. They're going to beat you. It just doesn't. And I see these next 2 guys in that way. I'll just get into it with the Texans and the 2. CJ Stroud is playing at an MVP level right now. He just is. This whole thing with Nico and Stephon Diggs and Dell honestly hasn't been all we thought it could be. But CJ Stroud has been more than anyone could have even hoped for. This dude is playing, I think as of right now, if I had to kind of, give you, I said he was my MVP pick earlier in the offseason. I did have him as my MVP pick. I think right now he is playing that kind of ball very easily playing the best ball at quarterback that anyone else in the league is. The only other person that keeps up with him is Lamar Jackson, who is also having an MVP caliber season. And this offense has just found its groove. And I'm going to put them in the 1. it's a really tough call to make because the defense isn't fantastic, but I do think that this offense has something no other team has, and that's the ability to just switch back and forth their style and what they want to do. If they want to smash you and they want to just run the ball down your throat, they want to crush you that way, they will send Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson and Justice Hill and that offensive line that they have, which isn't great, but it works well because of the scheme and everything. They'll send that down your throat to stop you, or to, enforce the run. And then if they're forced into a situation where they have to get into the passing game, Lamar Jackson is playing out of his flippin' mind. Just right along CJ Stroud as the best quarterback in the league right now, in my opinion. I want to talk a little bit about the Texans because I kind of skipped over them to leak into my number one with the Ravens. But another reason why I wouldn't put them over the Ravens is I don't think their defense is good enough to say that that's the difference. And if we're going to try to knock the Ravens for, how their defense has been doing the last few weeks, I don't think you can say anything different about the Texans. And the thing about the Ravens defense is you know what you're going to get. These are high-scoring games we've been seeing from the Ravens in terms of, what the other team is scoring. But no other team in the league has this much of a back and forth as the Ravens do. And by back and forth, I mean it doesn't feel, their games don't feel 30-23. Their games feel 5-4. You got down the field 4 times and scored. We get down 5 times and scored. And that's because they have complete control on offense. And I wouldn't say complete control on defense. I wouldn't say that. But what they do on defense is limit explosive plays, limit, breaking tackles and 60-yard runs and everything like that. They're limiting that drastically. It's the pass defense that's kind of struggling too. But the pass defense, as I said, isn't letting up a bunch of bombs over everyone's head. In fact, I would say, despite the amount of points we've seen on the Ravens, it's been Marlon Humphrey, Nate Wiggins, Kyle Hamilton playing really good ball on this defense. Roquan Smith still playing really good ball. This defensive line is nasty. Travis Jones is awesome. Those guys are all, on the D-line, and Roque are really good in the run game. And then Nate Wiggins and Marlon Humphrey are still playing good football. So it's not as drastic as I think as it is for other teams that allow a lot of points or whatever. That could be biased there, but for the Texans, I don't see them in that same way as having that kind of control. To me, a lot of the Texans' success so far this season has just been CJ Stroud is an animal. And I honestly, I'm going to say it right now, feel like my MVP take is pretty solid for Stroud. I'm pretty sure that's who's getting the MVP unless something drastic happens. So anyways, that's going to do it for this power ranking and tier list. Let me know what you would change and do different and where I was wrong. Bye.